Okay, we are now live. We were fighting some hardware issues and working with some new software here, but we're online and we're going to be talking about the 2019 Virginia storm chase season. And we've got one more member to add to the list is when he pops in here. I haven't had any contact with him other than send him some links, but we'll start with that. But I want to really kind of begin things as we get set up here to promote a little bit more about the Mid-Atlantic Chaser Con that's coming up. Actually, it's going in the mail tomorrow, but I've signed the contract for renting a room at the Science Museum in Richmond, and it's going to be in the same room we were in last year. This past year was the RFD Forum there in the Science Museum on Broad Street, and it's going to be Saturday, November 7th. We were going to, we've been doing it the last couple of years, the end of October, but the end of October this year is Halloween. So we're not going to do that on Halloween. The good news about October or November 7th is that that's the last day of daylight saving time. So it'll be a long day for us. So just a couple of things about that. Again, it's going to be on the November 7th on Saturday. And we're going to have the morning be basically a case study of the April 16th, 2011 tornado outbreak in North Carolina. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the April 27th, 2011 outbreak, but about 10, or actually, I guess it was 11 days earlier, there was another outbreak in North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. And to that effect, we're going to have representatives from the National Weather Service, talk about their coverage that day. We're going to have a storm chaser who chased that day in North Carolina. I'm working on a TV meteorologist out of the Raleigh area that covered it that day. I'm trying to make contact with him. So that'll be the morning discussion. Then right after lunch, we're going to have our famous panel discussion, if you will, if you want to call it that, our famous panel discussion. But this year is basically going to be an interview. Bill Hark of our planning committee is going to sit down in front of the group with Dave Hoadley and Roy Britt, who are two of the original storm chasers here in the nation. I mean, they were chasing long before many people were even born. And so, and they're not going to probably just give any kind of presentation, but just talk about their chases, both here locally in the Mid-Atlantic and, of course, out west. And both of them were very widely known in the chasing circles, especially from way back. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then in the afternoon, we're going to go with several different topics after the panel discussion. Jeff Halverson from the University of Maryland, Baltimore College is going to be talking. He's a professor there. He's actually publishing a severe weather textbook this coming fall. And he's going to be talking about it. He was supposed to speak 2 years ago and had some situations at home that he couldn't make. He had to basically have a furnace replaced. So he couldn't talk, but he's coming this year to talk. And then those of you familiar with the podcast Stormfront Freaks, we're going to have Phil Johnson, the moderator, come talk. He obviously runs that podcast and that the business associated with it, but he's also a storm chaser in his own right. And he's coming down from the southern Ohio, Ashby-Scope, the Ohio Valley. He chases there, of course, and he chases out west on the plains as well. So that's kind of a real quick wrap up. We've got several other speakers we're working on, but just circle November 7th on your calendars. That'll be a fun time.
Sounds like it.
All righty. Well, we are ready to start talking about this past season's chase in 2019. And I guess first up, if he's ready, we'll go with Peter Forrester.
I am ready, so I'll go ahead and get my screen share up and working here. Make sure I share the right window.
Yes. And I should mention that Peter's camera is not working well, but we can still see his screen share. So.
Yeah. All right. I'm in a full screen, so tell me if you can see it.
All good on my end.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so I'm going to be talking about my favorite storm chase from this year, which is a little something I call Culpeper Magic. And chasers in the area are familiar with this little corridor kind of north of I-64, south of I-66 that does this magical thing occasionally where we get storms out of a setup that shouldn't really be producing the kind of storms that it does. So this was on May 24th. This happened in a very active season for this part of Virginia. And I think I ended up chasing like 6 or 7 days in a row and being very, very successful on each of them. So this day, May 24th, was only a marginal risk for our area. Obviously, there was a system that stretched all the way down into the Gulf states with that slight risk, but the area where I chased was just this marginal. And the dynamics for the system really were marginal. You had 35 to 40 knots of shear, bulk effective shear, and then only about 1,500 cape over the area where I was chasing. But you can see to the south, there's 2,000 joules of cape. And sometimes we chasers like to look for what we call the cape nose. So we actually like to chase a little bit north of that cape bullseye. And that just happens to be where this event happened. And you can actually see there, if you look carefully at the cape map here, you can see we've got some surface winds, and there's actually a surface front that's set up right in this area. And so we have due easterly winds over the Fredericksburg area, and then northerly winds over Loudoun County. And then you look further south, and it's actually southerly winds over the Carolinas. So that was an interesting note. And another interesting thermodynamic property at this time was the low-level lapse rates increasing to 8 degrees in the area south of where I was chasing. Again, you kind of like to chase on the nose of those highest values. And 8 degrees for low-level lapse rates, it's pretty impressive. You see it pretty commonly in the summer. It's a little more rare in the spring when this happened. So here's just to kind of look at the national setup. There were obviously a lot of storms in the deep south, really good moisture flow. And you see 2 little cells there right in Northern Virginia. And this is the only major thing happening in the state that day. So the area where this happened, obviously north of I-64, south of I-66, kind of in this central Virginia area. And this is what I call the Route 29 corridor. It's one of my favorite places to chase in Virginia. It's wide open. There's a lot of farmland, a lot of cut down areas where trees have been cleared. And Route 29 is a fantastic road. It's 4 lanes with a median in the middle the whole way. Relatively rural, so there's very rarely traffic problems and great views. And we call this area around the Culpeper, there's a little bit of a lee troughing feature, which is sometimes you can back winds locally in this area because of the Blue Ridge to the west and deepening systems that can occur on a very local scale right in this area. So 18 to 21Z surface analysis showed a stationary front exactly over Culpeper, basically north of I-64, and a trailing occluded front down to the south there. And the occluded front intersected with the Blue Ridge just to the north of Culpeper. So naturally, this is where I kind of looked for storm initiation. This storm initiation had actually been very accurately forecast by all of the high-resolution convective models for actually multiple days. So I was very confident with this target, and with the front, the intersection of the front and the Blue Ridge Mountains, this was the perfect area for it to happen. So I was sitting in Culpeper just waiting for these storms to fire, and they did. This is one of the first radar frames. You can see a cluster of small, weak convective cells, not very strong echoes, but a good indicator. So I was sitting here watching these storms. An hour later, they had intensified a little bit, but still nothing terribly impressive. They're decently sheared. You can see the elongated shape here, especially in the southern one. And then I decided to grab a view of the southern one just north of the town of Madison. And it had very marginal low-level rotation, kind of a broad, it might be rotating, it might not be rotating, but based on that shape of the radar reflectivity, it probably was. And so this was my view north of the town of Madison. Not particularly impressive. I was kind of sitting there hoping, well, maybe the storms will do something, maybe they won't. But this is a pretty typical view for a late spring, early summer kind of storm setup off the Blue Ridge. It was all right. So an hour later, 22Z, 6 p.m., storms organized a little bit more. Still not terribly impressive, though. You can see this one a little further north, kind of near Warrenton, has an interesting little hook echo on it. I'm not totally sure if that's just a problem with the radar or the way the reflectivity just happened to set up, but the rotation was actually strengthening a little bit on a few of these little convective cells. And so this Madison storm started to develop supercell-like features. You can see up upper left here, you can see kind of a vertical updraft, and then this nice dark rain-free base, and then obviously the lowering beneath it, indicative of a weak wall cloud structure, not terribly impressive. But then also note right here above the tree line, there's some low-level moisture that's starting to get stuck into the storm, and that indicates that the storm is about to be surface-based convection. So instead of being elevated, not being able to take full advantage of the cape that's available, suddenly this moist air is rising directly from the surface. And again, this a little further along Route 29, a little bit further north, same storm, and you can see in the background here, right above the tree line, that this convection is really starting to get ramped up, and low-level clouds are starting to form right over me. And these were actually streaming to right to left, so kind of away from the precipitation, which could be an indicator of outflow, but I wasn't really sure at the time. So this is a quick video, a time-lapse that I shot of the storm at this stage. You can see the convection bubbling in the background, and these low-level clouds condensing and rising into the storm, indicating the surface-based nature of it. And so this time-lapse was probably 15 or 10 or 15 miles to the northeast of the town of Madison. So moving forward, 22:30Z, 6:30 p.m., the storm decided to ramp up right as it ran into the front. It ran over the front and intensified right as it got over Culpeper. And this is when it really started to get organized. It started developing a deeper mesocyclone, stronger reflectivities, as you would expect when you run into a frontal boundary like this. So the reason I love chasing around Culpeper is these wide open fields and a great road network. You can go pretty much anywhere inside these large fields. So the storm, the mesocyclone, is this red arrow, kind of formed over Culpeper and drifted slowly to the southeast. And my location was right here, right on the side of the highway, totally wide open vineyards and farmland. It's like this particular location I'd always wanted to find a supercell, and I call it the Kansas, the little hidden Kansas in Virginia. And it's just wonderful. And this was the view that once the supercell ramped up, the low-level striations became completely visible, the low-level moisture streaming out, and just this beautiful mesocyclone that I was able to time-lapse and video. And I just sat here for maybe 20 minutes watching this really beautiful mesocyclone. But this was actually the dying part of the storm. I didn't realize at the time, but this was trailing behind the main updraft. And the main updraft, you can see a little bit of it in the upper left corner of this picture, and that was just starting to ramp up when I took this photograph. So here's a quick time lapse of the first mesocyclone that I saw, just rolling across this gorgeous farmland. And you can see those low-level clouds kind of look like outflow, but they actually ended up being inflow into a new mesocyclone that developed right on top of me.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was just a wonderful storm to watch. And you know, when you get excited about a storm and suddenly the adrenaline is flowing and you're jumping around or however you deal with being excited with a storm, this view right here had it all for me. And so I had to snap myself back into the mode of, okay, I need to focus on what the storm is actually doing and figure out where I need to go next. So at 22:41, 6:45, this storm started developing a hook echo, and I was right underneath it. I was in absolutely perfect positioning to watch this thing develop. And because of the farmland, I had great visibility. I could see the entire base of the storm, and I knew that there was relatively little danger for a tornado. And this is the new mesocyclone that formed just on top of me. You can kind of see some streaks of hail that are falling. And this is what we would call the updraft vaults, this area of clear air in between the precipitation and the base of the mesocyclone. And I drove about 10 minutes, and I pulled over and saw this view and was just totally blown away. And here's the other side of that mesocyclone. I was so close to it that my camera couldn't get the whole thing. And then I backed off, and I took one of my favorite photographs of the year, just this gorgeous, low precipitation supercell with
Wow.
with a RFD cut. You can see the RFD cut right here in the middle.
Yep.
And inflow tail. It had it all. And this updraft vault was just spectacular. And you see my two chasing partners here. This was my brother. One of the first times I took him out storm chasing, and one of the friends from Charlottesville. And they were treated to a heck of a show. This is the kind of thing you'd expect to see in the Great Plains, and it's just hanging out here over Culpeper. So after 7 p.m., it formed a really nice scorpion tail hook echo, the kind of thing you see under a mesocyclone with maybe an RFD, but not really a super strong indicator of a tornado. So there was some low-level rotation, but it wasn't intense enough to really worry, for me to worry about what I was seeing. And it was an easy chase. I just kind of rolled slowly down Route 3 and pulled over wherever I had a view and watched this thing as it meandered to the southeast, basically straight towards Fredericksburg. And it just kept on getting more intense looking as it moved. Here's another shot of that open field right near Route 3. This was maybe 7:15, so still plenty of daylight at this time. And then this is my final view. This is a bridge. I forget which river or lake it is. But I decided to stop here and just let it roll past me. It ended up rolling into Fredericksburg. But you can kind of see how it's less rugged looking, more smooth looking. And it's beautiful, but that actually kind of indicates that the storm is weakening just a little bit. So I decided to let it roll past and watch the spectacular view. And the sun was kind of going down at this point. The ISO on my camera was pretty high, but it was pretty dark here. So that's the whole thing. I have the whole video of the chase uploaded to YouTube. I took multiple time lapses with my DSLR and lots of photographs and stuff. So it's a really fun video, really fun chase, and I just can't wait until the next one in this area.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a nice one. I like the views of the storm. In fact, the chase territory up there, people used to make fun of me when I lived in Fredericksburg because I'd always hit Culpeper. And it's for those same reasons that you talked about, is the road network, the wide open fields, and storms just seem to happen there.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Well, I see we've had Bill Hart join us. Hey, how's it going?
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound good, look good. So I thought what we would do is we'll go to Andrew next, Andrew Smith, and then we'll roll over to you, Bill. How about that?
Okay, sounds good.
Right?
Yeah. Wish I had a good enough storm to follow Peters there. That's a tough act to follow there, especially around here. So I was going to talk about April the 19th this year. I think it was the 19th. The day where it was actually a moderate risk day across central and southern Virginia. I'm going to pull up the SPC map here for you. Let me share. Okay, so a pretty big moderate area for the East Coast, from Southern Virginia all the way down through central North Carolina, eastern South Carolina. So I believe there was a area low pressure moving up through the Ohio Valley, trailing cold front, pushing through, and then warm front retreating north across the state that morning. And as things advanced throughout the day, line of storm started firing along the front in the western part of the state, and especially down in, I think the meat of the activity that kind of fired that day was down here in west central North Carolina. I know there were multiple kind of supercellular structure storms that were firing down there, but things were kind of staying kind of quiet up in Virginia, at least as I was making my way down towards the South Boston area. And unfortunately, I don't have any good pictures from that day because it was an extremely frustrating storm chase for me because I was delayed getting out of Richmond, heading southwest. Pull up Google Earth here and kind of show you where everything was. Richmond's up here. So my target was the South Boston area down here. Clarksville's here, Danville's over here. And by the time I was in about Keysville, which is somewhere in this area, it's not showing up on the map, but the storms are already kind of pushing in the South Boston area, but they're already starting to line out and they were losing their intensity. There was a tornado warning moving its way up through north of South Boston up into Charlotte County, but it was completely rain wrapped. I was able to get up close enough to the meso to see the storm, but it was just this giant green mass that was not visible at all. And so as I tried to stay in front of that as best I could, keep seeing what was happening. But as that was happening, a storm actually did kind of fire up south of it in front of everything that was heading toward Chase City. So I dove south and got in front of that storm and got a little closer than I intended to. But the problem down in that area too is there's very bad cell phone reception along 360 between between Lunenburg and the South Boston area. So it was all I could do to find somewhere where I would get a radar update and see where these storms were going, because they did fire a tornado warning on the storm coming into Chase City, but the initial Weather Service polygon had it at a very, very hard east angle, which didn't make sense based on what radar reflectivity I did have, or radar updates I did have, and the storm motion I was seeing. So I sat near the Chase City airport and had a decent view west of the storm, which, by the way the polygon was written, was coming dead at me, but I could very plainly see just from the sky that it was moving from left to right and heading away from me. So eventually they did reissue the warning and had it more of a northeast trajectory as opposed to the due east trajectory they initially put out there. I'm still scratching my head on what they were seeing when they issued that warning, but I leave it to the experts, not myself. But after that, the storms, as they came to Richmond, just really fell apart. I followed them all the way up followed them along 360 all the way back into Chesterfield County, and there was just not much to see, just murky nothingness, a lot of rain. I think the initial storm did kind of go up towards Farmville and stay tornado warning, and I came up behind it, but again, there's just nothing to see. I never saw any. Some of the radar reflectivities looked decent, but I came in right behind where the mesocyclone was, and I never saw any signs of any damage up that way. But tons of rain, and not even any real hail, but the atmospheric conditions that day weren't really hail conducive. I think Cape was barely 1,000 joules around here, and plenty of shear. It was a setup that on paper should have been more prolific, I feel like, as it moved eastward. And, initially it seemed that way down in North Carolina, but I yet to really figure out why the storms kind of fizzled the way they did as they pushed into the Richmond metro area and just kind of let me down on a day that was going to be probably my top storm chase day of the year. And, because of other things going on, I wasn't able to chase a whole lot this year. So made the best of it, I would say. I enjoyed being out there. As frustrating as it can be sometimes, it's still just kind of nice getting out there and seeing storms and seeing structure. I mean, I saw a little bit of structure on the second storm that was tornado warned in Chase City, but certainly nothing like what Peter saw there. That was pretty awesome to see that kind of stuff. I've seen that stuff before around here, and it does make you feel good when you can find that stuff. Plains quality storms here on the East Coast, but fortunately this year wasn't the year for me to find that around here.
Yeah, I remember that day, and I actually chased over on the Route 29 corridor, and actually that was the day it was an EF3 tornado that hit just south of Rocky Mount. That I wasn't out of position. It was in a bad place to have chased anyway. But I chased another storm. It was over on 29, a tornado warned storm, and I was in a spot. The circulation passed by maybe 3 miles to my west. Saw nothing. It was just rain wrapped and yucky. So I agree with you that part of it is I attributed to my curse of the moderate risk. I always have trouble with moderate risks.
Moderates and now enhanced these days around here seem to be kisses of death when it comes to SBC outlooks and storm coverage around here.
Yeah, give me a marginal or the old C text, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, all that.
Hey Andrew, were you in contact with your station through this whole process? And if so, what were they kind of talking about the Franklin County storm early in the morning?
So I was dialed into Channel 6. I recall them talking about it a little bit, but Franklin County is a little outside their coverage area, so they would just kind of touch. Just mention that, the early storms had caused damage out in the western part of the state. So it was, more of a reason to heed the warnings for what was coming later on that day. I don't recall anything specific they talked about that storm, but I know they did kind of keep mentioning it briefly as just kind of a reinforcer on why the viewer should have taken the threat seriously.
Right, because I think around here we were taken a bit by surprise of that Franklin catch, because it happened at like 9:30 in the morning or something, and that kind of got us all worked up. Like, oh, this day might be gigantic, right? Kind of that mindset going into it.
Yeah, that storm caught us all by surprise. I was trying, once I saw it crossing the North Carolina-Virginia line and knowing that it had a sustained rotation on it for quite a while, I tried to get ahead of it. I wound up north of it as it neared Smith Mountain Lake area in Franklin County, and it passed by just to my west. I could see the remnant wall cloud, but the tornado had already dropped and receded. And I think that particular supercell actually went on and dropped another tornado further north near Bedford.
I actually saw that Bedford tornado. That was the one moment this year that I was in an uncomfortable situation, because that storm was more dynamic than it looked on radar.
Yeah, it was hauling, but by the time it passed me, I was hard pressed to even try to keep up with it. And given the roads around Smith Mountain Lake, I just kind of had to wave bye-bye at it. So,
right.
Okay, cool. Well, we all have frustrating chases, so we can identify.
Yep. Yeah. If you look at the SBC report map from that day, there's a giant void around Richmond, and I hit west, and nothing happened. There's a bunch of reports east of Richmond, but I didn't play that. I think that was a later in the day threat towards the evening, so it would have been kind of fruitless to go down there anyway. But that's how it goes sometimes.
Okay, Mr. Hark, what do you have for us?
Okay, well, actually, I was out that same day on April 19th, and had pretty good success. Of course, as Andrew said, it was a very frustrating day. I'm gonna try and bring up a picture here. I guess I just hit share screen on this, right?
Yeah, share screen and go to your application window and pick what you want to see.
Okay, so.
Yeah, this is new software for all of us. So.
Okay. And then if I hit, do you see the picture?
No, I haven't seen your screen come up yet.
Oh, okay. Let's see, remember. Okay. See screen, allow. Oh, I know what this is. It's a send. That's weird. It's giving me one of these things that says ask permission to do it. Okay. To allow it, and then it's not letting me do it. That's really nice.
That's frustrating.
Permission. Let's see. I'll talk for a little bit while I'm figure this out. I was also out that day, and I was left Richmond a little bit late. I think as Andrew did, and my initial target area on April 19th was down near the Virginia-North Carolina border, maybe the Danville area. And I kind of liked that area, and just maybe north of the border, there was on a satellite, there was some clearing and a little bit higher cape. And as I was getting toward South Boston, I could see some, sort of semi-discrete cells just to the southwest. They're there was a line, but then just ahead of the line, I thought there may be some discrete cells that may start rotating, and so I fueled up in South Boston, and I went west on 58. And there's a little town called Turbeville, and the storm was actually rotating nicely, and actually kind of overshot and got into the mezzo, which kind of went over me. I saw the wind shift. And I tried to follow north a little bit, I guess to the north side of South Boston. At that point, the storm got away from me. And then there was another storm down in North Carolina just to the southeast that caught my attention. So I went east, and this also became tornado warned and was rotating. And in a little area called Aaron's Creek Road in Halifax County, I dropped south, and I could see the mezzo had this nice kind of lowering, and it was rotating, and then it looks like it got blasted with some outflow from the storm, and followed it north and east on 58, and had pretty rapid cloud motion as it crossed 58, and I tried to catch up with on the north side of John Carroll Reservoir and lost it at that point, and then at that point the chase was over, and headed back. I think I saw Peter on that storm too, didn't I?
Yeah, I ran into you right at your first view of that second storm, I think, and I was watching it come straight towards us. I'm like, I'm out of here.
I kind of drove into it. I think later on saw Dave Hoadley was out there too. I think
That's
you took
right.
a picture of Hoadley.
I did see Dave too. Yeah.
Yeah, if Dave Hoadley's out there, it's worth going out.
Oh yes, and he does it with he does it with not nearly as much technology as the rest of us.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he's got more, and he's more up here about experience with it than the rest of us have put together.
Oh yes, can you see my picture now?
Hang on a second. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what you're seeing right there, this is a view of the tornado warned storm. This is Aaron's Creek Road, just south of 58.
And Bill, what we're seeing is your screen with three pictures and a radar shot. Have you picked the right screen to share?
Yes, I did. I picked the. That's not working. Let's see. I'm trying to enlarge it here. As you can see, I'm really good with technology.
Just can you open that up in a viewer or?
I'm doing it on a. Do you see it now? Whoops. How about now?
No, we still see the thumbnails basically.
Oh,
It seems like you're just sharing that file window.
I'm trying to open the.
Can you go back to the sharing button? Stop sharing and go back to it, and then click on that and pick the application that's opened up the picture.
Oh, okay, that might work. Okay, let's see. Okay, okay, share a screen.
And then you should have a thing there that says application window at the top of the share screen picture. You click on you hit on that tab, and then you click on the application that has your picture in it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, this should work. If you click on the, yeah, there we go.
There you
see it now?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, so you should just see one picture on your view, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is an image of the tornado warned storm. It was about 5:07 p.m. Aaron's Creek Road, just south of 58. I'm looking south. This is Halifax County, northwest of Clarksville, and I'm heading down the road, and I see this up ahead. And there's a nice lowering. And with the tornado warning, I was thinking this could actually be a tornado. And then I got a little bit closer, and I see this. And this little, this is a little bit further south, and there was some rotation. But the problem is if you're looking this direction, the outflow of the storm kind of hit this little lowering and blew it kind of off to the left if you're looking at the screen, and then kind of got blown out. But it had this nice sort of, it just started rotating. I mean, a little bit. It's pretty good structure for Virginia.
Sure. And
let's see. This was earlier. This is a radar shot. Yeah, I was pretty close to that.
There's my dot right there next to you. Looking at.
For some reason, it's showing me going northeast. I'm actually sitting right there, waiting for that couplet to come toward me, and it was kind of murky and not the best view. But for Virginia, that's pretty that's pretty decent.
Sure. Yeah, that's the hard part of some of the areas of Virginia. You're exhibiting right there is finding the roads and the views that allows you to see those things.
This final picture was the view of the first tornado warned storm. That was about 4:26 p.m. and I'm on the south side of 58, east of Turbeville, looking southwest. So.
Yeah. Cool.
So anyway, that was probably my best chase of the of the year. I mean, I got a couple other nice lightning shots and things, but that's probably my favorite one for the season.
Well, it's probably a good idea that I didn't choose April 19th because I thought about that. So, because I chased that day, I chased several storms, and it was on a couple tornado warning storms, but I did not choose that day. So what I chose, let's see if I can, if I got everything set up here. Let me try my luck with share screen. And let's go here. And I need to do this. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can see like the PowerPoint.
Right.
I can see PowerPoint, but not the slideshow.
Right. Yeah. That's what I've got that set up. I'm
Okay.
having this software is kind of interesting. So I'm trying to figure out, make sure I'm hitting the right buttons. All right. So I chose May 12th, which was the busiest day that I had this past year. I actually chased 3 different either severe warned or tornado warned storms, all in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And here's the sounding from Roanoke that day, that morning. If you can see that, it's a little small, but you can see that there's plenty of shear. There wasn't a whole lot of cape, but there was plenty of shear, low-level shears at 30 knots, and so it was there, but it really wasn't on the SPC outlook. Wasn't really looking ballistic. I mean, there you see we were under basically a marginal risk, which, as I've said before, I'd rather chase these than a moderate risk any day. But the overall setup at the surface, this is just the surface obs and the stationary boundary that I drew in there on the black dotted line. The boundary basically draped across from Virginia from about Lexington, south and east through Lynchburg, just south of the 460 corridor, and then over to Virginia Beach area, Tidewater area. And that was almost the same setup as it was the day before, only slightly south of the frontage sagged slightly south. So we were kind of in a wedge situation. You can see the northeasterly winds there in the Richmond area, which typically happens about that time of year. Mm-hmm. So storm number 1, this was kind of at the aftermath. This was the hail swath on rotation track. To give you an idea, here in the middle is Lynchburg. This is Route 460 to the west, and that's the town of Bedford. So that the hail swath from this storm went from southwest to northeast. I basically got ahead of the storm by punching through it just before it crossed 460. I could see, as you see over here, this is also 460 in the town of Bedford. I could see the storm and a lowering to my south as I was rolling along, but I wanted to get ahead of it. So I punched through some of the precipitation and got ahead of it. Unfortunately, the storm itself, with the trajectory to the northeast, kept heading into what becomes very, very quickly becomes unchaseable territory. Once you get north of 460 here, Lynchburg's off to the right. It starts getting into hilly country, kind of the foothills of the Blue Ridge, if you will. Not a lot of views, but what I did find on this first storm, you can see here I am. This is 4:14 p.m. Looking off to the west. Here's the rotation just to my west, and you can see it here. There's the clear slot. There's the base, and then this whole thing was rotating. But unfortunately, and as you can see, this is actually a picture taken on level ground. The road was actually going left to right, is going uphill pretty quickly. And about 60 seconds after I snapped this photo, this whole area was socked in with rain. And that, no matter which way I twisted and turned on those back roads, I couldn't get out of the rain. So I basically had to call it off on that storm, and it went severe warn fairly quickly after this.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm trying to interpret this radar image. Was this mesocyclone on the northwest side of the storm? Was it anticyclonic?
I think it was. I meant to pull up the earlier ones. I don't have the other shots on this thing. I think it was because this storm. I'd have to pull up the file, but this storm was developing as it came. If you go back to, let me see, back to this, you can see it was fairly intense down here. I think my interpretation is it split. And this was the right split went and basically dissipated, but the left split held together, which I think it was anticyclonic.
Wow, that's really interesting.
But I didn't. I've got the other radar views elsewhere. I didn't pull those up. But that's my interpretation. Is I was actually looking at the left split.
Okay.
So good catch. I didn't mention that, but you're right. That this was and it was frustrating because I wanted to get a better view, but this is the best I could do of the day. But the good news was there were plenty of other storms. So once I pulled off this and got out of the rain, I think I went over to the town of Forest, which is just west of Lynchburg, and dropped south to get out of all that mess. And I finally stopped and took stock of what was going on. I said, there's storms further south. So this is what I found to go by going further south. And as you can see, this is about an hour later. These are 10-minute intervals between radar views. This is Route 501 here. This is Rustburg going down to Brookneal. This is Lynchburg would be kind of at the top left of the view. So this is down further southeast. And this particular line segment was marching from west to east. And as you can see, it intensified a bit. I was really interested by this little Boeing segment down here, keeping an eye on it. And then as it continued moving east, it wound up, the National Weather Service office in Blacksburg wound up triggering a tornado warning on it. And I was right there in front of it when the tornado warning went off. So same idea here. Here's the hail swath and rotation track. To give you an idea of geography, this is Route 29 over here. That would be the town of Gretna. This is Route 40, Virginia Route 40, going kind of west to east. This is Brookneal. And I was basically here watching the storm come in. And then, of course, here's the rotation track as well. Basically, the base of the cell is going west to east as it was coming right at me as I was sitting over here in what was essentially the eastern, kind of the northeastern corner of Pennsylvania County there. What I was seeing from this location this is storm number 2, was a nice wall cloud. You can kind of get a picture of it here and then a close-up. And I think it was about this time or shortly thereafter, because I was tweeting pictures out. Because of course at the time I'm live streaming this whole time for Channel 7 here in Roanoke, and I'm tweeting out pictures, tagging them and tagging the National Weather Service office. And I think I just sent this picture out, tweeted this one out, and tagged the Weather Service, and they triggered the tornado warning up just after this. Now, knowing that the tornado warning was there, I wanted a closer look, so I headed west on Route 40. This is Virginia Route 40 here. This is just a parking lot just off of it. And this was the base of the cell. This whole thing was rotating around here. And on the well, I don't have the video clip for this one because I've got another video clip lined up. But it looked like right before the rain closed in, because you can see the rain curtain moving from left to right, that there was something trying to drop right here because this whole thing was rotating. But by the time it happened, it was all rain wrapped, and I was beating feet back east to do that. And what I wound up doing was finding a spot where I could watch for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and you could see the nice RFD cut in the whole storm right here. So that was the area that was tornado warned. Again, the rain filled in, and I never saw anything I could identify as a funnel in that one. And by the time this storm reached the Route 501 corridor, it had all rain wrapped, and I just needed to get out of the way just to make sure I didn't get bulldozed by a storm that had a little bit of hail in it and might have had a tornado rain wrap that I couldn't see. But that wasn't the last storm of the day. Further south, there was more activity going on. This is just after 7 o'clock, as you see here, 7:10. Here's South Boston. We've been talking about that already today, South Boston, Halifax. So this is Route 501. Here's Route 58. All right, and that's my location looking west. I was just kind of to the southwest of Halifax, looking at some interesting structure that I could see, and with the rotation indicated here. And again, a hail swath and rotation track. And this is South Boston here. So the main part of the storm went just north of the center of South Boston. And I'll show you a picture of that later. And here's the rotation track on it. So when I pulled up and found a spot on this road where I could see to the west, this was my first view of it. I could see some sculpting of the clouds, looked like a nice something trying to get going there underneath a mesocyclone base. I could see the rain over here, but it took a while to take shape. And so I sat there for a while, and this is roughly half an hour later, and now the storm had approached and had actually taken shape. What was actually happening is this southern end down here had and you'll see in a video clip, I'll show it a little bit, had a bit of a shelf cloud that eventually dissipated and morphed into a wall cloud as the circulation tightened up just to my west. So let's see, here was the wall cloud after it tightened up. This is Virginia Route 360 that goes between Halifax and Danville. Looking here, I found an open field I could look off to the west. And this was, whoops, somehow I know they got moved around. Anyway, that was the wall cloud. Let me see if I'm going to stop sharing here and go back to a video clip. I think I can do. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me play this. This is a little dark because I had to convert it from another format. But this is a time lapse, and you can see the southern end. You can see the shelf cloud building here coming at me off to the southern end of this. But then watch what happens up here, just to the west of the left of the trees. Shelf cloud comes at me. You can tell there's a little bit of traffic on that road. Then all of a sudden, boom, the shelf cloud disappears, and you have inflow in this wall cloud starts taking place.
That's pretty cool.
That ramped up quick.
It did. And I was
wow.
I sat there for quite a while because I had basically a high-speed road to get away, and I had a couple of routes planned out already. But that storm was really something that it took me by surprise, and especially as it got toward dark there. Let me stop sharing this again.
That's pretty cool, because I earlier looking at that shelf cloud, I would just been like a total meh. I mean, not very impressive early on, and then it just went for it.
Yeah, and it took me by surprise because there was some like I showed up here, I guess it was some hints of rotation, but it really tightened up quickly within about 5 or 6 minutes. And then I followed it on a little bit further south, and this is what it looked like. Excuse me, as I kind of took some back roads down toward South Boston, and then this is actually in South Boston, looking north. This is Business 501 looking north as it went by to my north. And of course, I had my vehicle huddled underneath one of those car shelters just in case there was any hail as this went by. But so that was my busiest day of the chase season, was those 3 storms. And you can tell it was several hours worth of chasing and action. And it's one of those days you feel like, yes, I did something good today.
It's interesting. There was a tornado on the day before the day that you had. It was and there's actually a video of it. It was in Campbell County, the day before, and there was actually some video of it. It was obviously not chaser video, but it was like random person out there, and I would not have even bothered chasing that day, and yet there was this tornado.
Yeah, I think I did chase that day, but I didn't have a lot. No, there was a reason I couldn't chase that way. I remember that day because I saw the tornado report and I was thinking, geez, I should have gone out today, but I couldn't make it out.
Every time.
Chris, I'm curious, when you were watching that shelf cloud, were you getting outflow, or did it switch to inflow as it turned into a wall cloud, or do you remember what the winds were doing?
I think by the time I didn't feel any outflow, and I think by the time it got close enough to where there would have been outflow, the shelf cloud. I mean, the inflow had taken over. I don't remember any outflow from that, because as I said, I mean, I sat there for quite a while watching this thing come at me. So the shelf cloud was many miles away when I first saw it. Well, many for Virginia, probably 10 or 12 miles away. So, by the time it got close enough where I would have felt outflow, I think it had fallen apart and the storm had reorganized. So, anything else? Peter, did you mention something?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I'm looking here there's a live comment section, and it looks like somebody named Luke Barrett, and he asked, and I think it's he's referring back on the April 19th. He's asking about if there was a tornado near Oak Level, and I think that was a morning tornado. I don't think any of us were chasing that.
Oak Level. Would
Oak
that
Level.
be Bedford or Franklin County or?
I think that's Franklin County. Oak Level's right there on Route 220 between Martinsville and Rocky Mount. And that tornado, that's the one that hit there. It wasn't Oak Level. It was actually a little further north of there. I forget the name of the little town. That was not really a town. It's just an intersection that it crossed. But if you go through there, you can still see the scar. You can still see where the trees were all down. There was a house that was demolished just before the tornado crossed Route 220. There's actually a junkyard, a salvage yard that's off to the west side of 220, and it has a bunch of old like RVs and buses and stuff, and there's a bus that's still perched on top of another bus. They haven't taken it down yet, that the tornado picked up and dropped down on top of it.
Can you all
that
see
was that
this? Can you all see this April 19th thing on my screen? Is it showing up?
No.
Hang on a second.
It's the National Weather Service out of Blacksburg.
Yeah.
Is it coming through now?
Yep.
Okay, and here's what the gentleman was referring to. Here's looks like an EF3. It was a little place called Oak Level to Henry Fork. I'm not sure if that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, Oak Level may have been about where it touched down, but that's not where it crossed the highway. I guess I was thinking about where it crossed the highway.
Okay.
So I can tell a little story about that storm. I saw it basically fire, and I was still in Blacksburg, so I was watching it cross north from the Carolina state line, and like, well, shoot, this started earlier than I thought. I got to get out there. And so, of course, by the time I was out on 460 or wherever, in chaseable terrain, the EF3 had already dropped and lifted and was north of Smith Mountain Lake. And I was watching that storm on radar, and I thought it had hit the wedge. It had died completely. All of the stuff that normally happens to tornado warning storms in Virginia. And so I'm sitting there, and I watched this remnant storm cell pass in front of me, and it dropped a tornado, really not very far from me. It was definitely an uncomfortable situation because there was no rotation on radar. Nothing structurally indicated, and then the storm dropped an EF1, and I think that was a few miles west of Bedford, and I was right there for all of that. So it was really a very interesting day. Then that early in the morning, it was just a shock.
Yeah, I mean, because I had been talking to Brent Watts about that day the night before, and I'd already made plans that I was going to go out and live stream, and that thing fired and came across so early that there was no way I could get in front of it.
Right.
So, well, cool. Anything else that anybody has? Any other little anecdotes about the 2019 season? How did you guys feel about it overall in terms of chase opportunities?
I mean, for me personally, it was harder for me to dedicate time to get out, so I tried to save it for, what I thought were more certain setup days and not kind of the lucky days. So I didn't get out there a whole lot, and I didn't feel like there were a ton of big setup days here in Virginia. There are obviously a lot of the smaller days that, get you good storms. But I feel like it's been a while since we've had a true big convective setup that really does something here. I mean, maybe the hurricanes last year, but even that's kind of that's one way we get tornadoes around here, but it's not your typical mid-level or, cyclone coming from the west with a trailing cold front. But, I'll be curious to see if spring this year can fire up some more prolific setups around here.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, I got some good light, a little bit of, a couple of good lightning pictures, but nothing too impressive. And so it's just a matter of, we'll see what happens this spring. I mean, I had better luck this year out in the plains, or some years I get nothing in the plains and come back and get some in Virginia. So.
Yeah. Well, I know I was drooling over the storms that Peter was chasing up north, because the corridor up there where he talked about, Charlottesville and Culpeper seemed to get the bulk of it this year.
It did. It was just those marginal setups day after day with a little bit of a lee trough right by the Blue Ridge, and it ended up being an incredible year for me just because of that small feature.
Cool. Well, we'll see what things look like this season. Of course, we've got this strong trough coming through right now, coming across the south, and I don't think there's going to be enough instability in Virginia to cause much ruckus, but I do think that we could see some pretty strong winds, straight line winds out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So, anything else? Anybody can think of anybody else?
Question, Peter, where are you out of now?
I back and forth between Blacksburg and Charlottesville.
Okay.
Yeah, just one of the two, depending on the weekend, depending on the, whatever's going on. But right now, graduate school in Blacksburg and being in Charlottesville whenever I can.
I was going to say he doesn't have much to do. He's just in grad school. So.
They don't do anything.
So, well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time, and we'll do this again. Hopefully, we'll have more results from 2020. As I said in an earlier social media post, I like this year to be a great chasing year, but I want to, if there's any damage, it all happens to trees and no houses or anything.
Yes, great.
That's right.
Exactly. Yep.
That's right.
Couldn't agree more.
So, of course, that's why I know Andrew and I both, chase in conjunction with a couple television stations just to help with that warning process, but still, we want to see storms. We just don't want to see them cause any damage. So
Yeah, I'd rather see the structure than anything. So, I mean, that's what I'm about. I'm a structure freak.
Yep, I understand. So, all right. Well, as I mentioned at the top of this broadcast, circle November 7th on your calendar. We'll be at the Science Museum of Virginia again for the third version of Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon, and got some pretty cool speakers coming up. Some people still need to be firmed up, but we'll let you know as time goes on.
Awesome.
Great.
Cool.
All right.
Very cool. Well, thank you for putting this together.
Sure, you bet. It's always fun to talk storms.
Absolutely.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all.